Starbucks is the most popular coffee shop in the world with nearly 35,000 stores, each full of people asking to have their coffee ruined with almond milk. But regardless, how the hell did a poor immigrant kid from the projects of Brooklyn, New York create the entire thing? And how do we learn from this when we in the future create our own world-dominating business? Well, it all starts back in the 1960s in America, when nobody had the slightest fucking idea what good coffee actually was. Most people just drank instant coffee or some overcooked toilet water from a diner. I think people were just happy with the alternatives available at the time. That's meth. But that gave the three friends Jerry Baldwin, Gordon Bowker, and Zev Siegel an idea. Their idea was to sell bougie coffee beans and brewing setups from a small store so that people could make excellent coffee from the comfort of their own home. With that idea, they decided to open up this little shop called Starbucks in the heart of Seattle. And side note, the name Starbucks was inspired by the character Starbuck from the popular novel Moby Dick. And the logo was meant to be a siren, but initially you could see your titties before it was ruined by all the changes. Now, that same year that Starbucks opened up, our hero Howard Schultz was graduating from high school, which had been no small feat as his young life was not easy. When Howard was 7, his dad slipped on a patch of ice and broke his pelvis, and then he got fired. His family was extremely poor, and they really struggled to make ends meet. But despite this difficulty growing up, Howard worked hard at school, and he did well enough to go to college with an athletic scholarship. He was the first person in his family to go to college, and things were looking up. But then he was injured in his first season, and he lost his scholarship. This forced him to take out massive loans, to work low-paid jobs, and even to sell his own blood to pay for his education. These things made Howard tough and ambitious though. He worked hard out of college, and just a few years later he had worked his way up to the vice president of a kitchenware supply company. At this job, Howard saw that a tiny store from Seattle called Starbucks had been ordering massive quantities of coffee makers. This made him curious, so he decided to go and visit the store to see how they were selling so many. And there, he fell in love with the store. Even after leaving Seattle, he couldn't stop thinking about the flavorful coffee, and so eventually he went back to ask for a job. The founders didn't want to let him in on it initially, but over time, Howard's passion and perseverance won them over, and finally, he officially joined Starbucks. Then, while Howard was on a business trip to Italy, he stopped into a small coffee shop for a cup of joe, and there he found something that amazed him. The shop was a place full of people just hanging out and chatting over a cup of coffee. It was like a place between work and home for the Italians, where they could just relax and hang out. Howard decided that he had to bring this back to the States because there was no real place like that there. So he told the founders of Starbucks about what he had seen in Italy and what he had imagined for Starbucks to become. But the founders were resistant. They were already growing consistently, and they didn't see a reason to risk everything for this new idea. Howard couldn't convince them, and eventually he realized he would have to risk everything if he wanted to make his dream a reality, and he would have to strike out on his own. So he founded Il Giornale. This was the manifestation of his dream, but it was very money hungry. He spent a full year trying to find investors, getting turned down by more than 200 people that he asked. Finally, though, he was able to convince someone to give him the funding he needed, and Il Giornale became a raving success. People loved the atmosphere and the high-quality coffee. And then, much to Howard's delight, the original founders of Starbucks put the company up for sale. So he was able to buy the company and finally become the main man in charge. He had the power of Starbucks behind him and the business model of Il Giornale, so he started aggressively building stores. Starbucks was growing at a rate of up to 7 new stores per day, and in 2000, Howard even stepped down from CEO just to focus on dominating the rest of the world. But in 2008, when the financial crisis hit, this all came to a stop. The stock price plummeted as customers stopped showing up, but this showcased a deeper problem yet. As Starbucks had expanded so rapidly, it had lost its focus on the customer experience, and so Howard was reappointed as CEO to revitalize Starbucks, and he did this by focusing on his original vision from 20 years prior. And that vision is ultimately what has made Starbucks such a success. He made sure to grind the beans in-house so that the smell would fill the atmosphere, to have nice tables and chairs, all so that people would love to hang out there. It's the fact that Howard had a vision for who the customer would be, what they would experience, and how it would make them feel. This is why Starbucks can charge about 5 times more than anyone else for the same cup of drip coffee. And by now, everyone and their grandma's overweight cat has heard of Starbucks. They're one of the biggest companies in the world and one of the world's largest banks. Now, that's because of a 1000 IQ move they did, which was to invent Starbucks Rewards. This works like any other rewards program like Dutch Bros or whatever, where you can earn a free drink over time by collecting stars, but that's probably just 100 IQ, okay? The other 900 IQ came when they allowed customers to earn stars twice as fast by depositing money into their Starbucks account. This means that when regular customers deposit money into their account, Starbucks gets to hold onto it without paying interest, which means it's a win-win situation for Starbucks and for their customers. In total, they hold over $1.5 billion, which is more than 85% of US banks, which is really just an interest-free loan that they can use for anything they want since they only need to pay it back in drinks. So, because of Howard Schultz's genius vision, execution, and innovation, Starbucks will likely continue to grow. Check out this video to see some books that will make your brain freaking massive, and if you just want to become a digital nomad. Also subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.